we went broke and we spent a long time really not looking good on the outside, really focusing our priority. All of our goals were financial driven goals. We were really kind of suffering on the outside, right? From that appearance, we did not look like we were successful, but nonetheless, we were stacking chips and we were investing over and over again. And I think that is kind of the conversation here today is what is that financial priority? Is it to look like you have it all together or to actually have it all together? Because that's not something you do overnight.
Welcome back to another episode of The Donkey and the Bee with your hosts, Brett and Laura Shotkavis. We are coming at you talking all things marriage, entrepreneurship, and finances, and everything in between, which is pretty much life in general.
Exactly. Right. How to do life together with your spouse and make it a pretty BA life.
Exactly.
So what we're talking about today is the distinction between looking good and being good. And we're talking about it from the perspective of finances, right? People who are trying to look good, financially speaking, right? They're dressing good, they have the good car, they have from the outside what it looks like their stuff together, versus the other side of people who their goal is not necessarily the exterior appearance of being good, but actually being good, financially speaking, right? Not morally, but having your financial crap together and working from the inside out versus the outside in, because really from the outside in never really gets all the way in.
So this verse really struck me the first time I went to a Grant Cardone 10X conference. It was in Vegas. This was maybe 2017. And if you don't know Grant Cardone, he's a billionaire businessman. He does a lot of real estate transactions. He has a fund and such. And he talks about, a lot of his content talk about how he got to where he is. And how he got to where he is didn't include buying a bunch of shenanigans he didn't need. He talked about going broke. Like he didn't, he saved his money. He didn't spend on watches and parties and all this other stuff, right? Nice clothes. And so it's interesting going to his conference, and big shout out. I love the conference. But the attendees at these conferences, mostly men, and they're all dressed in their like Louis Vuitton suits, and they're like early 20s with their flashy watches and like walking around like they like pretty much own the world, right? And it honestly makes me laugh when I walk around these types of things, because I'm like, this isn't what got him to where he is now. Like he was wearing like t-shirts and shorts and like flip-flops and like didn't have all the fancy stuff. And so it's this like aura that people want to portray. They want to, it's pretty much just the big companies that are selling us on, you have to have these things in order to look good, in order to impress people. And it's so funny that we all fall for it. Like we all think that it's important until you hit that point in your life where you're like, oh, I don't really need all this stuff. Why am I spending my money on these things when I can be saving this for investments? And so when I came back from the conference, I didn't go with Brett. I went with some friends, and I came back and I told them this. And we just, I don't know, we talk about it and we see it all the time. So this is why we're talking about it today.
So nothing wrong with looking good, right? With having fancy clothes or having your hair nice and your nails done. Nothing wrong with any of that kind of stuff. Have a Range Rover. I don't care. It doesn't bother me at all, right? But it's really the priority behind it. It is what is your goal? Is your goal the outward appearance, or is it actually like what's on the inside? And in this context, we're talking about like being financially set, having financial intelligence, having your numbers be great for, your goals, early retirement, financial freedom, all those kind of things. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the priority is missed. And like you said, you gave an example of the people who are, those people, they're hustlers, right? They are working hard. They are trying to increase their income. And I guess there is a lot to be said for, there's a time and a place to spend the money on those things to go and network, right? But is your goal, is your priority to look good on the outside or to actually be good? Because we talked about this, right? Like we went broke and we spent a long time really not looking good on the outside, really focusing our priority. All of our goals were financial driven goals. We were really kind of suffering on the outside, right? From that appearance. We did not look like we were successful, but nonetheless, we were stacking chips and we were investing over and over again. And I think that is kind of the conversation here today is what is that financial priority? Is it to look like you have it all together or to actually have it all together? Because that's not something you do overnight.
So I did want to reiterate what you said. I think that it's important to put your best self forward, right? So we're not talking about like showing up to business meetings in like flip-flops, tank tops, and your hair up and all crazy. Even when you're living in that point of your life where you're saving a lot of money and you're quote unquote going broke, like we did, we still put our best self forward. We still went to the gym. We still took care of ourselves. We still were investing in, reading books and just pushing to become the best version of ourselves at that time, right? So I do think it's important and it is not all about the fancy cars and the nice clothes and that. I mean, it's not about that. But I think you still can look nice in Target t-shirts and Target shoes. I mean, I literally love Target. I still go there and I shop there for business clothes. So you can still not spend a ton of money on things because having a certain designer logo on a shirt or a purse, it doesn't mean anything. Like it's not important. And so I think that there's been a lot of people who have been infiltrated with this idea of brands are important. You have to support the brands. When you support the brands, then you've made it in life or whatever it may be. And so I think I just kind of want to break that. I feel like that's almost like a chain of like oppression on people of like, I have to wear the Nikes. I have to wear this in order to impress people around me. And that is just so false. I'll wear any, off-brand Nike or whatever it is. If it's an upside-down swoosh or whatever it may be, it doesn't matter. It's the same shoe. It's made in China and the same cut in the same factory. So it doesn't matter.
Right. For sure. So I guess it just goes back to what is your priority, right? Is it that short-term gain of looking great, or is it that long-term gain of I'm perhaps not going to look great, but I'm going to be getting my ducks in a row and really starting this snowball out because it's going to take, a long time, but then I will get to this, being financially good position.
Mm-hmm. It might be a security issue as well, to be honest. Like, where are you finding your security? Are you finding your security in other people's approval? Or are you finding your security for us in Christ and for us also in the fact that, like, we don't really care what other people think? People are going to think bad about you even when you're successful and when you're not successful. So why does it matter? So I think that's kind of the root of the issue of what we're talking about is are you craving that acceptance from the outside people, or are you craving the acceptance of you just like liking yourself, honestly, being proud of yourself and acknowledging that, hey, like I've been through a lot of hard things and we've struggled and we've saved and now look at us, So I think there's confidence is the big hot topic, I think, in this.
Yeah, for sure. Because when you're doing that long, hard process of focusing on the inside, financially speaking, right? Like a lot of times people, they don't see it. The neighbors don't see it. The coworkers don't see it, right? I mean, there's that book, The Millionaire Next Door, and it's like the average looking person, right? With a 15-year-old vehicle, and no one really knows that they have, multiple millions of dollars worth of assets. And that's really how we went, right? Like we took that kind of approach to this. And there's something to be said for you need to spend money on tools, right? Tools that'll help you make more money. We invest in those things, but that's not the flashy things, right? That's not the fancy car. I mean, we still don't have a fancy car, right? Like that is not my priority. I don't care about that kind of stuff. When we get to a place where I need the tax write-offs, perhaps at that point, right?
Exactly,
Then I have to get the fancy car, the expensive car, because I don't want to pay the government.
Yeah.
But I don't really care, or I'm not searching for other people's approval on, hey, Brett, you look great, you have your stuff together. So there was another kind of group of people that I see, they focus on looking good. And I saw it a lot as a kid. And when I was growing up, we grew up in a more economically challenged area. And there were people who said like, you have your stuff together when, your hat matches your sneakers, matches your shirt, right? And like, you have 6 colors of all these different things, right? And it's kind of more of a guy thing. But it's very similar in some cultures where, you know what, your whole focus, your entire goal is looking good. It's everything on the outside. So you will max credit cards, right? You will get the nice looking car when you live in a very rundown area, right? Like your kids cannot afford a great school. You're not spending that money investing it into, you know, a piece of real estate that'll put you in a great school district, things like that. You are trying to look good on the outside, right? You have the vehicle, you have the nails, you have the perm or whatever ladies do, right? And you're spending 115% of your income every single month, and you're maxing out your credit cards because your entire priority is, I want to look good from the outside. And no one really taught me anything about how to get good on the inside and invest in myself financially speaking.
So with that in mind, I think a lot of individuals, a lot of parents aren't thinking about what they're showing their kids. So in essence, if you're the type of person who grew up and has that mentality of I have to have the hat and the shirt and the shoes, I don't really relate to that because I know you said it's a guy thing. That's not something that's important to me.
Right.
But I've seen it and I've heard it. And so if you have that mentality growing up, because you probably got that from your parents and it probably was passed down to you. And so you grew up that way. So now you are probably, without even knowing it and realizing it, probably putting that mentality on your kids as well. And so your kids are going to grow up thinking, okay, I've only made it in life if I have, you know, the hat, shirt, and shoes that match. And so they are growing up thinking that I have to look good. And so it's a subconscious thing. We don't even think about it, right? It's just an automatic thing that happens because we saw our parents do it, and so we do it. And so it's almost like you got to break that cycle of that mentality so that you don't pass that down to your kids. And this is just one aspect of what we're talking about. There's lots of other things you can pass down to your kids. But I think we do things without realizing through our actions, and we're having these examples for our kids that we don't necessarily intend to have, but they do.
Yeah. And you can see it in the examples of generational wealth or generational poverty, right? Like you can look at parents and grandparents and so on and see like these people have been successful financially speaking over and over again, right? And it's the parents showing a lot more times than teaching, showing them, here's my priorities, here's what I'm doing, right? And it has nothing to do with who works harder and things like that, but it's kind of more who works smarter, who invests in themselves. And that's kind of what we're talking about, right? Starting with the inside first, where you don't see it on the outside and building towards that. And you see it on the opposite side. Sometimes, I mean, there's lack of opportunities and there's things that are real and difficult in this world. But a lot of times you see parents teaching their kids, just showing them, right? I'm showing you that I'm stressed out, maxing out my credit card.
Exactly.
But I have my Louis Vuitton bag and I have all these things, right? I'm getting my hair cut, you know, every 2 weeks and I'm spending all this money on my nails and Starbucks and all these things, right? Showing your kids that every time, but then they see you fighting with your spouse about money, about not being able to pay the electric bill and all those kind of things, right? Like that's really, I guess, the priority here. Have you recognized as a parent that here's what I am doing myself, and therefore I am teaching my children this same pattern. And honestly, they're probably going to grow up doing the exact same thing you just did.
A lot of people struggle with money their whole life, but they see money as bad at the same time. So if you struggle with money or finances, you saw your parents struggle with money or finances, and you yourself are struggling with it. When you see other people who have, you know, finances or have money, it's looked at as a bad thing. So it's almost like you want money because you need to pay your bills and you're trying to strive to, you know, the next step in the ladder at your business. But you still have this negative connotation about money and people who have money. So then you're almost like fighting against yourself in a way. So I see this with a lot of individuals, like they want to make more money and they get there and it's like, oh, I must have done something bad in order to get this. So I think that there's a mindset shift that needs to happen within yourself, that there's no real morality to money. It's not good or bad. You know, I don't say money is good or bad. It doesn't like break the law. You know what I mean? Itself, it can break the law in the hands of people, but itself, there's no morality to it. And so I think changing your mindset that money is a tool you can use for yourself, for good or bad. You can use it for good or bad when it's in your hands, but it's really, in essence, a tool. And so I think that there's just a mindset shift that needs to happen within people, knowing that you can use that tool for good, that it's not people who have money aren't bad or haven't gotten that money by doing quote unquote bad things, And so I just wanted to say that because I just rang true to me when that last comment that you said about individuals who struggle with money.
Yeah. Well, people think too much money is bad.
Yes.
And then on the other side, too little money is bad.
Yeah.
And I think it's a cultural thing that teaches you to be in the middle, to strive for the middle. Don't be great, be one of the sheep, right? It's almost like this is how corporate and maybe government can control you, because they're going to keep you in this kind of common space. If you're too low, fight to get in the middle. If you're too high, get pulled down by the other crabs in the bucket, because we can control you. We can control what your spending is. We can make sure that, you're kind of a slave to the system your entire life. You can make good money, but never really get exceptional, or else you feel uncomfortable. And then you kind of turn back the dial on your how hard you're working and what you're striving for.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks for joining us on another episode of The Donkey and the Bee. We hope that this hit home for you, or maybe just open your eyes on different things that you do within your life regarding your finances. So we do not run ads on this show because, as you all know, I think it's super obnoxious. I always have to press the 30-second fast forward every time whenever I'm listening to podcasts have that. So we do not run ads. And so as far as a thanks, what you can do to help this show grow is to share it. Just share it, just with one person. Just share it with one person who you think could really use this message and really utilize it within their life. And also, our other ask is to subscribe so you get alerted every time we drop a new Donkey and the Bee. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you on the next one.